Welcome to another edition of the World Cup of Great Darts Performances, and now we're moving into Group C, which focuses on the BDO World Championship. Paul Nicholson is here once again to talk us through four more iconic displays, starting with one of the earliest, Eric Bristow beating Bobby George in the 1980 final that sparked the start of a new era for darts.
Very much so. I mean, no disrespect, obviously, to the 78 and 79 finals, where we saw a lot of the usual suspects at the thick end of it, but you just get the feeling that the crowd was a bit more ramped up for 1980, and we were about to witness the start of something incredible with Eric. And as with every great sports person, they need somebody to drive them on to greatness. Would Eric have become a world champion without Bobby George? Yes, he would have, because he was that great. But the performance against Bobby in his first World Championship victory just made it a bit more special, and I just get the feeling it became unforgettable because of not just Eric's performance, but because of what Bobby contributed to.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't in terms of performance and stats, it wasn't his highest average in a final. He saved that when he thrashed Dave Whitcomb and John Lowe a few years later. But this kind of made him believe his own hype, I guess.
Yeah, because like you said in the post-match interview, that Bobby George was going to look forward to being the world number 2 for a very long time. I think there was a lot of promise with Eric well before 1980. But the fact of the matter is, you need that foundation, don't you? And you could see that in further years after this, it was easier for him to cross the line than it was in, say, 1980. You could see that there was intensity on his face, there was anxiety. And to be able to do that in front of a crowd with no real final experience of that sort of intensity and level before just made that performance as good as it was. And of all of the wins for Bristow at the World Championship, this is the one that everybody remembers the most.
Yeah. Second on the list has to be Phil Taylor in the most dramatic final ever seen at the Lakeside when he played Mike Gregory in 1992. Not only did he post the highest ever average in a BDO World Final, but he survived 6 match darts.
It's my favourite match of all time, and I don't think it'll ever be surpassed. There have been matches I've seen live which have captivated me to my, dark soul. But the fact of the matter is, this was a step up in performance in a final. It was a step up in drama to anything we'd ever seen before, even cascading past 1989 with that huge comeback from Eric against Jockey. This was, for me, the best darts match that's ever been played. And you can forget about performances of other people in different tournaments, but this is the one that sticks in my memory. And it's probably because I was only 12 years of age and you hold on to things from when you were a kid. But this performance from Phil was composed, going for his second world title. Mike Gregory is the best player in the world at the time, probably looking for his first, and you can tell the difference between someone who's done it before and someone who hadn't. That was why we had mismatched darts, but it is forgotten that Phil was that good in that game, and the way he closed it out as well, with no screwing about, that's what made that performance and that match so fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, he averaged just fractionally less when he thrashed Bristow 6-1 in 1990. But I guess, and the missing match darts, you could say, he could have lost. Why was that a better performance? But I guess the pressure he was putting on Gregory is why he missed, and he was playing that well to put the pressure on. And it showed, probably everyone knew that Phil Taylor was going to go on and become a legend from this point.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Now, great performances aren't always about the stats and the averages. Sometimes they're overcoming adversity, like a broken back. And who else has done that other than Bobby George?
Nobody. I've won a pro tour in the PDC with a broken rib, and that hurt a lot. But to have a broken back and to win through a semi-final with a great player like Magnus Caris, and we know about his prowess and his longevity within the game until he retired a couple of years ago. But it's more than that. You think about what's happened in the game in 1993 when John Lowe won and everybody was splitting away to the WDC. Bobby George stayed. And when he went to the Lakeside in 1994, the BDO system was on his shoulders. Everybody else who went there didn't have any pressure on them. There was all the pressure on Bobby George. So I can't imagine what that was like for him 14 years after making his first final, and then realizing I am pretty much the only stalwart here, and I've got to deliver to show that the BDO is very much alive. The pressure must have been unbelievable. And then when you've got a broken back as well, and still able to make the final, I can't conceive of pressure like that. And that's why this performance deserves to be in this list.
He was 4-2 down, and then he won 9 legs on the trot. The crowd was probably some of the greatest lakeside scenes you'll ever see. I mean, it's one of my go-to, if I want a bit of nostalgia, I'll go to that match on YouTube and see the scenes, and that's what darts was about. That's why people love darts. And I think it was just a shame that he was just in too much pain for the final, and John Park beat him 6-0 with like a low 80s average. But if imagine the scenes of it had he won it, and that's the only downside, I guess, to this performance, that he couldn't go on and win it. But we had to have this one in.
Yeah, I mean, the semi-final performance is heroic. And we throw around certain words too much these days, but that performance against Magnus was heroic. And you can forget about the final. John was the best player in that tournament. He was the most consistent, and he would go on to have his own greatness. He would win in 3 different arenas, and to lose to a great like John Park, there's no shame in that.
No.
But focusing on this semi-final, he really does deserve to be one of the great performers at Lakeside in the BDO World Championship overall for what he did in that semi.
And moving on to our last performance, it's not Keith Deller, it's not Raymond van Barneveld. We had to go with Martin Adams against Glendora in the 2015 semi-final. If you can't remember it, you've got to go back and watch it, haven't you, Paul?
Yeah, just a bit. I mean, you can't leave this out because it was such an incredible match. This, for me, is the equivalent of, say, Rob Cross and Michael Van Gerwen at Alexandra Palace, but at Lakeside, with 2 people in very different parts of their career. Adams coming towards the end of his storied career, and Durrant only just starting his legacy. And if you look at the match from the start to the finish, and you watch it from start to finish, imagine what it was like watching it live with a beverage and thinking, how are these people doing these things? The stats were brilliant, and they proved just what an incredible performance this was in the end.
Yeah, I mean, Durrant averaged almost 100, and that there were quite few and far between at the Lakeside. Adams nearly 98. They went right to the wire. They both mismatched darts in that deciding set, and the opponent would respond with a big checkout to stay in the game. The crowd were going wild. Under that pressure, you've got Adams at his age. You've got, he wouldn't win it again, and he just lost that final against Scott Mitchell. And then Glen Durrant was the star to come, who was going to go and win 3 in a couple of years later. So it was almost like a passing of the Lakeside baton in a way.
I suppose it was in some way. You obviously wouldn't see Martin win another Lakeside, and you would see Glen go on to win 3, but not without a little bit more heartache the following year. But he did his apprenticeship, and he was involved in a storied match even before he won a world championship. But I think even Glen would admit the performance from Martin to get this win here, this game deserves to be in this list without a shadow of a doubt.
Stats-wise, we went through a hell of a lot of matches, and for 2 players to be playing at that high standard, it just had to go in.
Yeah, we had to forget about certain things like 83 with Della and some of the Van Barneveld performances, the Chris Mason stuff from late 90s, even Hankey's performances, but ultimately this could not be left out of the list.
So all you need to do now is vote on the Twitter poll below, and the winner will advance to the next round. We'll be back with Group D, featuring 4 more iconic performances.